How do you deal with betrayal when you've been betrayed by the people you trusted? Betrayal is one of the most difficult challenges to overcome because it undermines the very pinnings of our connections, of the people we trust, of the givens and the certainties that we relied upon. So how do you overcome that? How do you know you can trust again? This is the challenge that this time of the year addresses, and especially poignant with the events going on in the world today, where allies have betrayed each other, where people don't feel they can trust their friends, whether it's in politics or in business or in other areas. You can't trust the media. So there's been betrayal on so many different levels, both on the microcosm and the macrocosm. Comes this time of the year, as we approach the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur, and teaches us the secret of how to overcome and deal with true betrayal. So please join me in this discussion, the continuing series, 60-Day Journey, Finding Forgiveness in Times of Betrayal. Simon Jacobson here, and we will be speaking about 60-Day Journey, Finding Forgiveness in Times of Betrayal. This program is dedicated by Benny Brenner in honor of her children Ariel and Sophia Licht, Mark and Abby Brenner, and Benjamin and Corinne Brenner. How do you deal with betrayal? I hope you've never been betrayed. But if you have been, how do you deal with it? Because betrayal is one of the most difficult things and challenges to overcome. Why? Because it undermines the very pinnings of our relationships. Someone you've trusted, a spouse, family member, a friend, an ally, a partner, and then they do something that breaches that trust. What do you do now? Is it just enough to say, oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake? How do you know they won't do it again? So there's that type of that conviction, that absolute clarity that you had has now been unfortunately compromised. And especially if it's a serious betrayal. So it would seem to suggest that once someone has been betrayed, too bad. You move on. You have to find other friends. But we know that's not so simple. Look at children who've been betrayed by parents or by family members. They always have problems with trust issues. Because then they meet as they get older and they enter their own relationships. They start testing because they're acutely sensitive to being betrayed, to being disappointed, especially if it happened on an ongoing basis. And they never learn the ability to just let go and trust someone. I can't tell you how many situations I personally have dealt with that came down to that element, the insecurity that resulted from a betrayal. And yet, we find that there are people who've had that challenge, and not only have they overcome it, they've gotten stronger in their connection. How's that possible? Without going into denial or just disconnecting, a dissonance. So, fascinatingly, this time of the year, this season, the holiday season, addresses this very topic. In many ways, is the essence of this entire season. And that's why in this continuing series that we've been doing called 60-Day Journey, the 60-Day Journey is the story of love, betrayal, and reconciliation. So a little history, and then we'll apply it to our lives. But before we go there, I want to just add a critical point. In our times especially, you can sense that we also have big trust issues. I mean, look what's going on with those at war, whether it's Ukraine, but let's talk about the Middle East. Can we trust our allies? And if you can't trust your allies, that is subtly or overtly a form of betrayal. Can we trust the media? Can we trust political parties, our leaders? And you see the polarization that's taking place. I am sure this has always been an issue, trust. But for some reason it really stands out today. Maybe technology amplifies and broadcasts it in a way that has become mass, on a mass scale. But regardless, it's definitely a very relevant and important topic that affects us all. Whom can you trust? And what do you do when you have been betrayed? So, what is the story, the history? The Bible tells us that at Sinai was a marriage, a commitment, a full marriage between God and the people. It's actually called that. And then 39 days later, though they had accepted at this marriage at Sinai that they would not marry another god, so to speak, the people went ahead and built a golden calf, absolutely violating that commitment in a very deliberate way. There's all kinds of explanations. How could they have done it? But they did. Moses, who was then on the mountain, comes down hearing this terrible news. He shatters the tablets. The tablets was the marriage contract that he had received from God, which included the second commandment, do not worship other gods. He then, after reprimanding the people, goes back up on the mountain and challenges God and beseeches him and begs him, please forgive the people. Because you can imagine that God said, look, I did nothing. What did they do to me? How can I trust them? How can I have a relationship with them? How can I be married to them? Build another nation. Start new. And Moses refuses. Forgive them. They're human beings. Yes, they're accountable and they're responsible and they will have to be dealt with. But I need you to give me hope. I need you to give me a back door, some opening that we can amend and we can find a way to rebuild the trust. That was the challenge Moses was faced. And if you think about it, it's an extremely relevant challenge to all of us when we're faced with the same situation. Do we give up and move on? Or do we try to repair? Now, in this case, Moses was confident, supremely and absolutely confident, that the relationship can be repaired. So I'm not going to say and apply that to every situation. There are situations in human relationships that sometimes you can't trust. And maybe there has to be a split. As last resort, obviously. But here Moses was absolutely confident. And interestingly, he spent 40 days and 40 nights and was not successful in getting God to forgive the people. And this wasn't because God was being stubborn. It was simply, how can I trust them? I commit to them. They commit to me. So Moses goes back up on the mountain a third time. The first time when he received the law, the Torah. The second time when he's asking for forgiveness and is not successful. And the third time. And here's where the 60 days begin. The third time, he begins on the first day of Elul, Rosh Chodesh Elul, which is the month that precedes Rosh Hashanah, the high holiday season. That's 30 days, and then another 10 days until Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is the 10th day of the month of Tishrei, which we're quickly approaching. And that is when he finally gains forgiveness, as we shall say, right after Kol Nidre, the evening service, and Yom Kippur Eve this year, Friday night, when we say, Vayomer Hashem, God said, Salachti kidvarecha, I have forgiven them as you have spoken. He essentially gives in to Moses' request. And Yom Kippur becomes exactly the Day of Atonement, Kippur, Kippurim, forgiveness and atonement. In a sense, this is the reason it's the holiest day of the year. That's not a random thing, because it was the birth of hope and the birth of forgiveness, which in many ways is the greatest gift in life. Because it's one thing to gain many different blessings, but what happens if there's a breach, if there's a mistake, inadvertent or deliberate? Can we repair? And remember, human beings are flawed. We're not perfect. So here's once in history, a man stood up and would not take no for an answer, kept knocking on the door, and he gained forgiveness. God granted him forgiveness. And this opened the door for forgiveness forever. As they say, to err is human, to forgive is divine. The ability to transcend even a breach of trust. But what happened exactly here? Did God just give in because Moses just insisted? No. Moses' persistence, what it did was it reached, so to speak, we can't talk in anthropomorphic terms, so to speak, reached a deeper place in the divine heart, if you wish. That was beyond the scar and the wound created by the betrayal. And that's what happened. So the love was intact. Think of a heart. That's a healthy heart, but the arteries are blocked. The arteries were blocked because the people did that terrible crime. No one's minimizing that. But Moses was going for more. He said to God, you created this world. I'm paraphrasing. You created this human race. You know that you created them imperfectly. You know that they can make mistakes, and they will make, and sometimes terrible ones. So what are you saying to us? Either be perfect or I can't have a relationship with you. You know we're imperfect. So we will be accountable. And that's a key word we'll talk about in a moment. And we will do tshuva, which is return. But I need you to give me the commitment that if we do what we need to do, we can regain your trust. And this is not just between God, but in general between humans as well. But we have to do what we have to do. And that brings me to the responsibility part of the people. Because this wasn't just, okay, can do whatever I want, breach the trust, betray, and then say, I'm sorry. No. There's a process. Trust is built not on perfection, is the key story of Yom Kippur, but on accountability. And let's elaborate. It's one thing to sin, to transgress. It's one thing to commit a crime. It's another is to acknowledge it. Very often, what we do when we commit a crime, we call it a cover-up. We cover it up, deny it, or try to say it never happened. And in many ways, that's worse than the initial crime. I'm not sure who coined this expression, but the silence is worse than the rape. The silence is worse than the crime. I don't want to really, in a way, trivialize it by bringing in Watergate, but that was like the big thing, the cover-up. The cover-up. Think of an infection. Infection, God forbid, invades the body. If you nip it in the bud, you can eliminate it. But let's say you ignore it, and then it begins to fester and grow. And by the time you address it, it's now become a monster. It's the same idea. A lie. Someone lies. Then you acknowledge, I lied. So you correct it right at the outset. But if a lie has to be covered up by another lie, and it becomes a whole army of lies, then what? What Moses achieved was said, we will be accountable. And accountability means we will have that soul searching and introspection, which is exactly what we do during this season, the high holiday season. And we will perform a thing called tshuva. Tshuva means, people translate it, repentance, atonement. It's more than that. It's return. We will return to our core connection with you. That's why it's called return. Because if it's repentance, then it's okay, a person sinned. They leave the sins behind. They don't return. Returning means you're returning to your very essential connection, your essential love of the human being created in the divine image. And you're accountable about it. That in turn, the reciprocity that God showed was, okay, that I shall forgive. Because we reach a place that's deeper than where the betrayal touched. Now we have to talk about how to apply that, and of course we'll discuss that. But that's the key, and it's the key to the story. So you imagine what kind of power that is. That no matter what happens in your life, there's always hope. Now, of course, you have to establish this doesn't mean that anytime someone betrays you, they deserve to be given the benefit of the doubt. There has to be that accountability. There has to be that conviction. You have to come to conclude that, yes, I can't trust this person again. Some people just are not trustworthy. I know many people who just make promises and then they break them again. So how do you know? Well, that's where the hard work comes. I've applied this concept, the Yom Kippur forgiveness hope concept, in the context of betrayal and trust to actual relationships. I can tell you from my own case studies, if you wish, real life stories. Has it always worked? No, because people have to be cooperative. So I'll give one case study, two case studies, one where it worked, one where it didn't work, just to be all rounded. Let's start with the negative one, which sadly, there was a betrayal. One party, one spouse betrayed the other, infidelity, and regretted it. But, it was very important to find out why there was the regret. Was the person caught? Yes. It wasn't just he came forth because he felt terrible, because he really wanted to have a true relationship. He was caught by a spouse, by others. And then he definitely expressed regret. There were children involved. His wife did not accept his regret. She didn't trust him. And I told him, one-on-one, you're going to have to earn her trust. How? I said accountability. True accountability, to the point that has to resonate with her. Now, unfortunately, he was not. He feigned it. He faked it. And I gave him the benefit of the doubt that he's trying. Obviously, the end story, she would have to decide. But I wasn't convinced either. So even though for a while he behaved and so on, as she let down her guard, and she knew clearly that this is not for sure, he fell again, and this time had this excuse and that excuse. The problem was it was repeated even after all his promises. So in a situation like that, did not live up to the Yom Kippur standard. And I could not argue with her, even though I was tried to, and tried to convince him. But he was already too polluted. Let's put it that way. Could we have continued to try? Everything's possible, but it didn't work. But let's talk about the positive scenario, where the Yom Kippur standard did shine through. And this was an instance, another type of betrayal, different sort completely. And also was not simple, didn't initially begin because the person had a conscience and wanted to just repair. But he was sincere. I know there's both cases are the he, could be the other way around as well. I understand that. But what worked was that after a while, he really loved his wife, his children. And the key challenge was, how do we access that love? Should be stronger than his so-called improprieties, stronger than his desires and his temptations. And it came down to really for him to appreciate, why is he married in the first place? What is this marriage about? What's the legacy that it will leave? So basically he came to a more spiritual place in his life that was stronger than he had the commitment when he got married. That's exactly the Yom Kippur story. At Sinai there was a marriage, but it was not challenged in a real way. The challenge of that they abrogated and they betrayed God brought out a deeper connection, and that's exactly what happened in this case. I don't know exactly, but similarly. And he learned to appreciate his spouse more than ever, and she learned to appreciate him. And that's when it clicked. It wasn't easy. It didn't take a month. Took time, but there was true accountability because there was true love. If you ask them today, and I have definitely sent people to them with their permission, of course, the wife will say, I was not ready to forgive him. I did not think he would regain my trust, but he did. Because there are things he did that he never had done before, that he didn't have to do. It wasn't for show. He actually dug deeper and found the soul connection to his spouse and to his family, and obviously did not ever betray again. Is he a perfect human being? Absolutely not. But in this area, he reached that higher state. And that's why Yom Kippur is the holiest day, the most sacred day. So my friends, what I would say is, it's absolutely possible. But it takes work. It takes honesty, integrity, sincerity, and yes, hard work to get out of your comfort zone, to not think you can get away with it, because that's the first step that people turn to. Maybe I can get away with it. Maybe I can maneuver my way. Especially if you're smart, I'll be shrewd, I'll cover up, half lies. Everyone can cover their tracks. That has to be completely discarded, that option. It has to be honest, vulnerable. Yom Kippur is a day of vulnerability. Now, of course, it requires vulnerability on everyone's part because everyone can get hurt. That's what trust is about. If you don't want to be hurt, you just lock yourself up. You just never let anyone into your life. There's never trust, and there never can be a breach of trust. But we're talking about here opening up. And when I dealt with that situation and many others, I absolutely cited the Yom Kippur story because it's such a beautiful story, it's such a powerful lesson and empowerment that it's possible. And it happened on the highest levels. We're talking about the ultimate betrayals. Can this take place in the world today? Yes, but there are conditions. You need the honesty. What I find the problem is I don't find there's honesty and therefore there's no trust. It's one thing, two people who are disagreeing, and then they say, okay, let's sit down. But everybody's just manipulating, pandering. It's all driven by self-interest. That can never cultivate trust. What that creates is if my self-interest and your self-interest happen to intersect, okay, for this short period of time, let's cooperate. But it's not a lasting relationship. This is a crisis in our times, both on a personal level and on a collective level and a global level. So Yom Kippur shines as a shining example of a standard that we should all be reaching. But that requires a certain, as I said, approach, a mindset. And that's our challenge today. The capacity to achieve that type of forgiveness is absolutely there. So finding forgiveness in times of betrayal is absolutely in reach. But Yom Kippur teaches us how. On Yom Kippur, we refrain from eating, there's fasting. We dress in white. We are sensitive and vulnerable. We don't go with arrogance. It's not, I'm going to gain forgiveness, great, let's go for it. There's a lot of refrain, a lot of restraint and humility. What we call bittul, stepping back, suspending yourself in face of receiving something greater. When a person has that, yes, you can gain the highest levels of forgiveness and connection and reconnection, even stronger than the bond that was there before. So now the challenge is, the next step is ours. Can we reach such level of modesty, such level of introspection, of accountability? Now, if you ask me, how do you reach that? Well, that comes down to your own asking yourself, where are you? Where do you stand? Do you have that within you? As one person told me recently, I think I've lost that part of myself, that innocence, that naivete, positive naivete. I've become too jaded by life. I've seen too many betrayals. I've been betrayed. I have betrayed others. I don't think there's a way back. Makes you cry. And I did. I said to him, Because that's not the case. I know you. And every morning we say, the soul you've given me is pure. We have that purity. And Yom Kippur reminds us every year of that purity and sanctity and whiteness, clarity and clarity and cleanliness. But it's more than cleanliness in the physical sense. It's like a clean slate, the type of going back home to the very essence of who you are. And that is indeed the journey of Yom Kippur. So I would encourage each one of you and myself to use Yom Kippur well this year more than ever. Whether you go to synagogue or you experience Yom Kippur in another fashion, it is a journey through the 5 levels of your soul, which I discuss at length in 60 days, in the book 60 Days. You could check it out. It's online as well. And it's a journey back to who you really are. Yes, as a newborn. Pure, innocent, vulnerable. That doesn't mean we ignore the realities of our lives today, but we're accountable about it. And we want to connect to that inner child. We want to connect to that pure place and then integrate it and that infuse our current lives. Wouldn't that be something? So if we enter with that type of commitment, doesn't mean we'll achieve it all, but we try our best and we're sincere about it. The doors open up from above. There will be a response. So we have to initiate, and it's our first step. So may everyone be blessed with the courage, with the strength, with the commitment to celebrate Yom Kippur in that powerful way. May you be blessed with it's written and sealed in the book of life, and be blessed with a healthy, joyous year. Only revealed blessings, abundance materially and spiritually. And may we continue our journey and recognize that the real you is that pure you. And the rest is the projected you. And our job is to bridge the two and allow the real you to inform the rest of our lives. Be blessed and be well. This has been Simon Jacobson. MeaningfulLife.com is our website where you can find this and many programs. Please subscribe to our offerings, to our YouTube channel. Please share. And I'd love to hear your feedback and thoughts and comments. Be blessed. Blessed year to all of you.
This program is brought to you by the Meaningful Life Center. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at meaningfullife.com/donate.